Hi, friends. Welcome back. This is Prophetic Update, August 2025. And today we'll look at this topic here, a new Middle East peace accord. And again, we like to explore what do scriptures have to say about this new development. Now, if you remember, in our last prophetic update of June, July 2025, we examined this Israel-Iran 12-day war and the conflicting narratives regarding the event. Firstly, that Iran's nuclear energy program was for domestic medical purposes, it was harmless, and that Israel took an unprovoked attack on Iran's sovereignty by hitting its nuclear energy program. But on the other hand, from the Israeli side, the narrative was Iran had posed an existential threat to the nation of Israel itself since 1979, when Ayatollah Khomeini took over the nation of Iran. It has sponsored this ring of fire of proxy nations, the axis of resistance to destroy the nation of Israel. That in the years 2021 to 2022, Iran's nuclear enrichment had really reached 60% enrichment level, way beyond the requirement for plain domestic use. And that IAEA had also verified that it had enough uranium to make 9 atom bombs. A fact that was also publicly announced by Iran in July 2022. Then came that fateful day, October 7, 2023, when Hamas from Gaza invaded into southern Israel and killed 1,300 people, took 250 hostages. That was the turning point of relations between Israel and the surrounding nations, especially with Iran, that has sponsored this Hamas terrorist group. And that Hezbollah from Lebanon and Houthis from Yemen were joining Hamas in lobbing their missiles into Israel after the war. Then in 2024, Israel began to take out the leaders of all these proxy nations that were surrounding Israel. Israel took out Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, and then took out Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader in Lebanon, and then took out the Iranian air defense system in Tehran itself. And then at the end of 2024, we saw the fall of the Assad regime in Syria by al-Jolani himself. Within 2 weeks, he destroyed the Assad regime and took over the government of Syria. Then came 2025, President Trump's second term in office, and he began a series of initiatives to make a deal with Iran to limit its uranium enrichment program. And on April the 12th, President Trump announced Iran will give you 60 days to come to an agreement and a settlement of where the enrichment level would be fixed. That 60 days expired on June 12th, and on June 13th, Israel began its Operation Rising Lion and attacked the nuclear facilities and missile storage facilities in Iran itself. So you noticed, after October 7, 2023, Israel began its campaign to neutralize all these proxy nations that were funded by Iran. Israel took out all the leadership of all these nations. Lebanon, Gaza, began its attack on Yemen itself. And once the threat from these nations was neutralized, it's time to attack Iran itself. We also talked about the fact that this is not just a battle between nations that are converging against Israel. but that this is a cosmic battle of the spiritual realm. It's a battleground of the spirit. We explored verses from Daniel chapter 10, Esther chapter 3 to chapter 7, where this spirit of genocide against Israel manifested itself since the days of Daniel and Esther itself. And so on June the 13th, the IAF, the Israeli Air Force, took out 800 missile launch batteries and missile storage sites in Iran itself, cleared off all the air defense systems of Iran, and then hit the nuclear sites at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, and killed about 30 of the IRGC commanders and 11 nuclear scientists in Tehran itself. And within a day, Iran hit back ferociously with 550 missiles with 1,000 drones that inflicted heavy damage on Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem, Beersheba, especially with their hypersonic Ramsha 4 missiles, Mach 5, multiple warheads, and Israel had to appeal to President Trump to bring this war to an end. And so on June the 22nd, President Trump sent in 7 B-2 stealth bombers to take out the nuclear facilities, especially in Fordow and Natanz, with its 14 bunker buster bombs, the massive ordnance penetrator that could penetrate more than 200 feet below ground surface through hard concrete and granite. Now, those of us who find prophetic scriptures fascinating, you might want to know that June the 19th, when President Trump decided to send in these bombers to take out Iran's nuclear sites, June 19th this year is the 23rd of Sivan in the Hebrew calendar. And the 23rd of Sivan is the day, that same day, when Ahasuerus, King Xerxes I, allowed Esther and Mordecai to issue that letter to destroy and annihilate all the forces of anyone that would come to assault the Jews as a result of Haman's directive earlier. It's the same day. And Mordecai and Esther from the tribe of Benjamin, who appealed to this Persian king, just as Bibi Benjamin Netanyahu appealed to President Trump. The gallows that Haman prepared to hang Mordecai corresponds to the nuclear warheads that Iran has prepared to destroy Israel. And the gallows that were meant to destroy Mordecai ended up being used to hang Haman himself, just as the nuclear sites that were meant to destroy Israel turned up to lead to Iran's destruction itself. And that word, forces of the enemies that Haman has commanded to destroy the Jews in Esther chapter 8, verses 9 to 14. That word forces there, the root word there is the whirl of power, which corresponds to the centrifuges of the world of nuclear power that Iran has developed. And King Xerxes allowed Mordecai and the Jews to take up arms to destroy that whirl of forces, just as President Trump commanded his bombers to go and destroy these whirling centrifuges of Iran on the 23rd of Sivan. So what you're seeing here, tremendous prophetic fulfillment of events that happened during Esther's time 2,500 years ago. Fascinating. Now, immediately After Operation Midnight Hammer, President Trump announced a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, stopped them from fighting. Why? Because President Trump doesn't want the war to go on. He used the B-2 bombers to stop the war. Because Trump wasn't interested in prolonging the war. As we mentioned, he wanted to bring about a Middle East peace deal. He was working towards that since his visit into Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince MBS in May 2025. And so this ceasefire has been in effect for the past 2 months now. But it's still a very fragile truce because we are still reading of mysterious explosions and fires in and around Tehran, and Tehran releasing all the identities of all the fighter pilots that are now being targeted, threatening to send rockets into their very homes themselves. But neither sides are willing to go to war right now. Israel had seen the power of Iran's incoming missiles and would not want to be that adventurous again. The next focus would be on regime change, and that's why we want to focus on today. Regime change, there are a couple of reasons that support the idea of regime change. You notice President Benjamin Netanyahu in his address to the nation, he talked about regime change. There are possibly 4 reasons when regime change can be considered. Number 1, because of Iran's authoritarian governance. It has led to a lot of unease in the nations. It claims itself to be the sole guardian of Islamic jurisprudence. The right to make Islamic rules is theirs, and that has troubled all the other Middle Eastern nations that are of Sunni majority. Number 2, its security doctrine, based heavily on the development of its ballistic missiles program, nuclear warheads, and supporting proxy nations to bring havoc into Israel. That has created a lot of instability in the Middle East itself. And therefore, could regime change be considered to turn this around? Number 3, the internal unrest within the nation of Iran itself. Could this unrest be tapped in order to topple the regime from within the nation itself? Number 4, Iran's complete rejection of possible alignment with the West and its preference to look east towards China and towards Russia. That flies in the face of what the West is trying to do to contain China and to contain Russia. And therefore, regime change might be useful to bring about a new government in Iran that would be more friendly towards the West. So these are some possibilities that would make regime change a viable alternative than direct invasion. And we have looked at number 1 and number 2 in our previous prophetic update. Now, let's look at number 3 now. Internal unrest. How united is the opposition? Now, we discussed a bit of this in our previous prophetic update. Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah of Iran that was exiled out of Iran in 1979, grew up in America. He is the rightful benefactor of Iran, and there are some opposition members in Iran that are looking forward to his return to take over the government. And on July the 26th in Munich, he met with a lot of opposition leaders of Iran, and they have decided to continue to support the local struggle against this authoritarian regime, to put pressure on this Islamic Republic that is becoming weak now, and to encourage defection from among the ranks of the clerical parliamentarians who are ruling over Iran today, and to collaborate among themselves to plan for Iran's future. Again, there are some problems there because if you look at the ethnic map of Iran there are more than 13 different major tribes that are Iran, each of them with their own motives, with their own goals. For Reza Pahlavi to get them all together is a mammoth task. And even among the ruling elites, there are differences there. The principalists and conservatives, the current clerical regime ruling over Iran, that wants to maintain that hardline Islamic rule over Iran. And then there are the reformists, also clerics, but they want to bring about changes to the hardline stand of the conservatives. And then there are the moderates, who consist of monarchies. Monarchies are those who want to preserve the monarchy of the Shah Reza Pahlavi, who wants him to come back and rule over Iran, a small minority. And there are also Republicans who do not want a monarchy, but they want the rule of law, have elections. And so Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi had to tread carefully when he met all these opposition leaders, all of them with different goals. And he carefully said that he was not interested in taking over the reins of the government. He was there just to facilitate regime change and thereafter have a re-election to see where the people wants to go. Okay, but I want to look at number 4 now. The lack of a pro-Western democratic alignment. The geopolitical and geoeconomic strategies that Iran has taken recently. And that's our next narrative. A narrative that's causing concern in the West. And when I say the West, I don't mean just USA and President Trump. I'm including inside here MI6, London, as well as France. Now remember, the entire Middle East was carved up mainly by London and France. It's the British mandate. France occupied Syria and Lebanon, whereas England had jurisdiction over the Transjordan area, Palestine and Israel. Their interests are still there. And so this third narrative that we're looking at, rumblings from the east and the north. This map here shows this Belt and Road Initiative, a land trade route that connects China with Europe through Iran itself. This is part of the comprehensive strategic partnership between Iran and China, signed in 2021 under the Shanghai Cooperation. Tehran has a bright future to become that global focus, the node of trade routes between East and West, and between North in St. Petersburg and Moscow, right down to the South in India. This is all part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, which the West is really concerned about. And then in 2024, Iran formally joined BRICS, which is a regional trading bloc that is against the West. Okay, and this is rumblings from the north, the trade route from the north, known as the International North-South Transport Corridor, 2025, that facilitates trade between Russia, St. Petersburg, right to India via Iran, saving costs between India and Russia by 55%. This allows Russia to escape the economic sanctions imposed by the West to go east towards India and China. And this transport corridor avoids the choke points at the Straits of Bosphorus in Turkey, at the Suez Canal in Egypt, at the Bab al-Mandab in Yemen and Somalia. Now, another development that's making the news this past week is here. The trade corridor known as Zangezur joining Baku in Azerbaijan to Yerevan in Armenia. This is an important trade route across the South Caucasus funded by both Russia and China to facilitate trade between China and the West, and also for Iran to go through this route into Russia. But there's trouble between Azerbaijan and Armenia and the West. USA and MI6 have been supporting Azerbaijan in its skirmishes with Iran. And just this week, President Trump mediated peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia, offering to even lease this trade corridor for the next 100 years. Now, again, this is a very, very strategic area in the Southern Caucasus that the West has been using to strangle Iran, using Azerbaijan, using Georgia here. This is the Zangezur corridor here. So, when you look at this geopolitical and geoeconomic developments on the Belt and Road Initiative from the east and the international North-South corridor linking Russia into India and so on, a verse that comes to mind is Daniel 11, verse 44. But news from the east and the north shall trouble him, the Antichrist, and therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. Now, of course, this is during the time of the end, the Great Tribulation, and so on. The threat that comes from the east and the north is still there. What we are seeing here today are developments towards this final climax that's reported here in Daniel chapter 11, verse 44. Okay, and so looking at this today, you have Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. This is the worst alliance that the West is fearing. And therefore you have the war in Ukraine and the latest development here in Zangezur, trying to arrest this development, trying to stop this North-South corridor, this Belt Road Initiative of China, trying to sabotage that in order to maintain the Western interest and their hegemony over the maritime trade of the world. These are land routes that circumvent the maritime trade route that the West controls. And so this accounts for the current war that's happening in Ukraine. Right? Russia sees NATO expansion as a threat to its borders, whereas NATO sees Russia's invasion into Ukraine as a threat towards the Western hegemony there. And I want to bring this up to mind again. What the scriptures say about this? Scripture says nations will rise and fall, empires will come and go. But the word of the Lord, his sovereignty over history will remain forever. Isaiah 40 verse 15 says it. The nations, they are just like a drop in a bucket, dust on the scales. We are looking at a God who has the power to break down all the nation's bows. We looked at that in our previous session, the prophecy of Jeremiah chapter 49. All the bows of Iran, he will break it. This is the God who is going to send the winds, who is going to set up thrones, and who is going to call all the exiles home, as we ended in our last prophetic update concerning Jeremiah chapter 49. Now, let me quickly bring you further to the east now into Pakistan. Again, China is involved here. This is known as the CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, that links the Belt and Road Initiative of China at Kashgar right down to the port of Pakistan there in Balochistan or Gwadar. There's a lot of problems happening there, and the Chinese Engineers are being chased away, presumably because of taxation differences and so on. So we wonder whether the West is involved in stirring up all these problems to cause problem in these Chinese investments here. What's happening in Cambodia and Thailand? Same thing. In its fish and rice corridor that China is developing, linking Western Cambodia right to the port here in Sihanoukville, which is a former US base during the Vietnam War. And recently, the war between Thailand and Cambodia, presumably because of some temple disputes here. But the bombs were bombing out Chinese facilities in Western Cambodia. Again, could the West be involved? Because a general from the US fleet, USS Savannah, just visited the area just before the trouble began. Again, Western interests are involved here. Remember, Cambodia and Vietnam were French colonies before. And America has been sending F-16s into Thailand with a possible base in Chiang Mai. So think again, friends. Has the war between the West and China already begun? Are efforts to contain China already underway in Iran, in Zangezhou, in Pakistan, Thailand, Cambodia? Now, I've mentioned this before in our revolution studies, back to Median, the video series, go and look at that, where there is this alternative route that President Trump and Bibi Netanyahu has been promoting. All right, the high-speed railway from Dubai to Riyadh through Neom, the new city in Saudi Arabia up north here, up into Jordan, and through the King's Highway right into Haifa, and from Haifa into Western Europe. This is the new trade route that the Abrahamic Accord is trying to facilitate. If President Trump could get all the Middle Eastern nations to come together, work together with Israel, there is this potential of this southern route that will again avoid all the choke points at the Suez. You don't have to go to the Red Sea. You don't have to go to the Bab al-Mandab at Yemen and Somalia. You don't have to go to even the choke point at the Straits of Hormuz here. A port here at UAE or even in Muscat in Oman here would facilitate trade across this new Saudi Arabian trade route. And that's why it's so important for Saudi Arabia, Oman, to come on board into this new Abrahamic Accord. Okay, let's come back to what the scriptures say. What has God got to say regarding all these geopolitical moves here? Think of Daniel chapter 4. When Daniel had that dream of that giant tree, a tree that grew strong, whose height has reached the heavens, and is seen by all the earth, that tree that has leaves that were lovely, and its fruit became abundant food for all. And under this tree, the beasts of the field can find shelter, branches for the birds of heaven to form their home. And so he had this magnificent dream. And Daniel interpreted the dream for him. He says, this tree is you, oh, King Nebuchadnezzar, your greatness, your geopolitical and geo-economic strategies. You have enlarged the kingdom of Babylon up to the heavens and your dominion to the end of the earth. But you see, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that a watcher, an angel, will come down and chop down the tree and destroy it. And they don't want. the dream, you will dwell with the beasts of the field for 7 times until you know the Most High rules the kingdom of men, and the Most High God will give your kingdom to whomever he chooses. And Daniel advised King Nebuchadnezzar, therefore, O king, break off from your sins, break off from your pride, show mercy to the poor. Romans chapter 13, governments are formed, ordained by God to bring about peace and justice to all people. So listen, friends, God allows empires to grow. God uses empires to bring about his purposes. God sets up Persia to destroy Babylon for their cruelty against Israel. God raised up Cyrus to free Israel and let them return to Jerusalem. God raised up Alexander the Great, the Greek Empire, to bring about the wars of the kings of the north and the kings of the south in Daniel 11 as a foreshadow of what will transpire in the end times. God allows all these empires to grow, to expand, to bring about his purposes, his plans. But once they rebel against God, once they become prideful like Nebuchadnezzar, then it's time for God to bring the axe down. This happened to Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, Belshazzar, in Daniel chapter 5. Daniel again warned Belshazzar, your grandfather acknowledged that there is a God in heaven that rules over your kingdom, and God restored him, returned Babylon to him. But you, Belshazzar, you have not humbled your heart. Although you knew all these things about your grandfather, you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven instead. You have profaned all the holy vessels of Jerusalem in your drunken orgy. And this God, who holds your breath in his hand, who owns all your ways, you have refused to glorify. And then he says, I will interpret the writing on the wall. Many, many tekel upasim, which means God has now numbered your kingdom. It's time for your kingdom to fall. Your days are over. And you, Belshazzar, you have been weighed in the balances and you have been found wanting. Tonight, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. God raised up the Persian Empire to take over Babylon that very night itself. Come to the New Testament. Jesus said the same thing when he was led to Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate was amazed that Jesus didn't want to say anything to defend himself. And Pilate told Jesus, don't you know I hold the power to your life and death here? And Jesus told Pilate in John chapter 19, verse 11, you have no authority over me unless it has been given to you from above. All authority on earth has been given by Almighty God himself. All nations and all empires, they are accountable to God for how they use the power and the authority that God has given to them. And we as believers, if we are in that position, God has put us there to remind pagan authorities that they rule under God. Their kingdom has been ordained by God for his special purposes that only God has prepared. And they would eventually be accountable to him. Those of us who are not in the position to be able to advise rulers like what Jesus did to Pilate, like what Daniel did to King Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. Paul says we can pray. Pray for the kings and the authorities that God has set above us, that we may have peaceful and a quiet life to live in tranquility. Which brings me to our next topic here. Peace in the Middle East. That's what President Trump is working towards. And we want to look at this from the perspective of scriptures. Now, we know that in 2020, President Trump successfully negotiated diplomatic ties between Israel and four nations in the Middle East. That is UAE, Bahrain, Morocco further west, as well as Sudan south of Egypt. These four nations signed a peace agreement with Israel. We also know that 1979, Anwar Sadat had already made a peace agreement with Israel. And King Hussein of Jordan in 1994 also has an existing peaceful relationship with Israel. Now, I want you to look at this poster that has formed the banner of a new website that immediately came about after Trump announced the ceasefire on June the 23rd between Israel and Iran, a new chance for a new Middle East. And in this banner, there are 10 kings listed here together with President Trump. Okay, this is the new coalition for regional security, the new Middle East, the new Abrahamic Accord. Some people call it the Abrahamic Shield. So here is President Trump and Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. All right, and here is General al-Sisi that has an existing peace treaty with Israel since 1979. And this is King Abdullah, peace treaty of Jordan with Israel since 1994. Okay, and then the first Abrahamic Accord. Here you have UAE, okay, Prince Sheikh Mohammed Zayed and Hamad bin Isa from Bahrain, UAE in Bahrain. And you have Morocco, this guy here, okay, King Mohammed VI of Morocco. Now, who else? Of course, we have Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS from Saudi Arabia, who was supposed to be in the Abrahamic Accord since the time of Trump in his first term, who almost came in October 7th before Hamas sabotaged this deal. Okay, and then we have Sheikh Haitham bin Tariq from Oman. Oman has been neutral for a long time, trying to be the Switzerland of the Middle East, a neutral party. But with all the choke points and Hamas coming in and so on, Oman stands a very good chance to join this new trade route that joins up to Riyadh into Haifa itself. Okay, and President Trump visited Oman together with UAE this May, this year. And then we have President Mahmoud Abbas of PLO West Bank. He has been quite outspoken against Hamas, working together with Israel to ensure that trouble from the West Bank, from Samaria, would be minimized. And President Trump and Bibi Netanyahu, both of them are looking forward to working together with President Mahmoud Abbas to see if PLO is ready to take over Gaza after all this mediation with Hamas is completed. Then we have President Joseph Aoun here on the extreme left here, President of Lebanon today, who is working together now with President Trump and Bibi Netanyahu to try and get the Hezbollah to disarm themselves. Okay, now he is also ready to join this peace accord, but he doesn't want to be the first. Everybody is looking for who would be the first to make the first move, because nobody wants to be ready to join this new peace deal unless Iran has been neutralized and unless the Palestinian issue is solved. That's the only issue. But now that the threat of Iran has been constrained, has been minimized, that danger is sort of taken away. The threat from the Shia north. Now, mediation efforts are ongoing feverishly to settle the Gaza-Palestinian problem. Once that's done, will this new Middle East Accord be set up? Okay, so President Joseph Aoun is waiting for who would make the first move. And then finally, we have Ahmad al-Shara, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, okay, the president of Syria today since January 2025. He is a dark horse here, and he is listed among all these 10 kings here. Now, when I mention 10 kings, of course, you're thinking of Daniel chapter 2, the 10 toes and the 10 kings in Revelation chapter 17 and 18. But no, my focus has always been on the Middle East. Some of you are looking at a Western Antichrist from Western Europe. We may have another 10. Okay, so I'm not shutting out some of you who are looking towards a Roman Antichrist. You have at the same time in Europe about 10 nations that are the key decision makers of European Union, of NATO, the coalition of the willing that recently came together to support Ukraine. Okay, in UK, you have Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, Emmanuel Macron of France, Belgium, Germany, under European Union, von der Leyen, under NATO, Mark Rutte, okay, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Spain, Denmark, Ireland, Netherlands, all these countries came together. Of the 28, 29 nations that are in the European Union today, these are about 10 nations that are calling themselves the coalition of the willing to support Ukraine. And also, presently, to support Palestine as a nation. Okay, so you're seeing developments happening in Western Europe itself. So I'm not discounting that. But it's obvious that scriptures are telling us that in the end time, there will be these 10 kings, whether they are from Europe or whether they are from Middle East. I've given you both the options here. And Daniel chapter 2, verse 42 tells us this. Daniel was interpreting the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had of this metallic statue, and Daniel was telling Nebuchadnezzar, the toes of the feet that are partly of iron and partly of clay. It reflects a kingdom that shall be partly strong and partly fragile. They will not be united, just as the iron does not mix with clay. But in the days of these 10 toes, these 10 kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. That's the stone that came flying in to smash these 10 toes in the dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had. Okay, it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, but this stone, it shall stand forever, the kingdom of God. Daniel was showing to King Nebuchadnezzar that in the end days, the kingdom of God, Jesus Christ, will return to destroy all these 10 kings that are going to come against Christ in the end. And Christ will set up this kingdom which shall stand forever. Okay? In Daniel chapter 7, he saw another vision. I saw in the night visions, behold, the fourth beast, dreadful, terrible, exceedingly strong, huge iron teeth, devouring and breaking in pieces, trembling even the residue with its feet. And this fourth beast is different from all the other 3 beasts before it. This fourth beast is at 10 horns now, not toes, but 10 horns. And Daniel said, I was considering the horns. And out of these 10 horns, there was another horn, a little horn coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, mouth speaking of pompous words. And I watched till the beast was slain. Its body was destroyed, given to burning flame. And the rest of the beasts, their dominion, were all taken away. And behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. Jesus returns at that time, the time of the 10 horns on the beast. Well, here we have a picture of 10 kings with the Antichrist, the little horn, coming up onto this final kingdom. The Antichrist kingdom, Roman kingdom, Islamic kingdom, whichever way you want to interpret it. I have taken you through both options. Well, either it could be a revived Roman Empire or it could be a revived Islamic caliphate. Possible. But out of this will grow up these 10 kings. And Revelation chapter 17 tells us more. I saw this woman, mystery, Babylon the Great, sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the 10 horns are 10 kings. We are left in no doubt. 10 horns are 10 kings. The 10 toes are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they will receive authority for 1 hour as kings together with the beast, the Antichrist. And all these 10 are of one mind. They will come together in one accord, and they will give their power, their authority to the beast. And these all will make war with the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them. Jesus returns and overcome all of these 10 kings, because he is Lord of Lords, King of Kings. And all those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. Hallelujah. So, will this new Middle East peace accord, Abrahamic Accords 2 or Abrahamic Seal or Abrahamic Alliance, will that be the 10 kings that's going to come in the end? Will that bring about a covenant of peace with many that's to be affirmed by that one figure, the one king? And will that figure be al-Shara'a, al-Jolani? And will that accord bring about that 2-state solution where Israel will acquiesce, will agree to allow Gaza to be ruled by some of these kings here? We don't know. We are looking forward to who is going to be the one who is going to affirm and sign this covenant together with President Trump and Israel. Will that accord give Israel that international credibility that it needs sorely today? And will that covenant eventually lead to the sacrifice on the Temple Mount without causing any more uproar and war in the Middle East, if these 10 kings can come together? Something that is building up surely, and we are waiting for it to make the headlines today. We'll have to wait and see. Very likely, very possible, because, friends, the word 7 years has already been tossed around several times. Many of these nations have agreed that it will take 7 years for Hamas to exit Gaza. They plan for these things to eventuate over 7 years, and for several Arab nations to govern Gaza, to provide the security there. Nations that are being considered currently to supervise the security of Gaza in the interim as Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Egypt for 7 years before passing it to Mahmoud Abbas, PLO here, to finally take over. This is the two-state solution that Joel chapter 3 is talking about. But you're going to see here, the Lord himself is now narrowing events down. Okay, are we going to set this covenant being affirmed shortly? And will sacrifices begin soon? Daniel's 70th week will begin. 7 years. And God will show to us whether this is going to be Al-Shara himself or somebody else. Some of you have been asking me questions. Is Al-Shara the one who is going to confirm that covenant, the eventual Antichrist himself? Okay, so my session today is just to share with you some of the ideas that are being tossed around and to advise all of us here to exercise caution. There are possibilities that are happening. The Lord's narrowing events down, but we still got to wait and see carefully. Right now, what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, things are still very, very shaky here. Now, before President Trump could even bring about this Abrahamic Accords 2, we have developments coming up in Syria. Okay. Now, in fact, on May the 25th, when President Trump met with Al-Shara in Riyadh, he has given his word to President Trump that he will recognize Israel as a nation. When President Trump invited Jolani to join these Abrahamic Accords on May the 25th, he has agreed to it. And then problems came up with Syria when the Bedouin Sunni tribes attacked the Druze community in Suwede province in southern Syria. And Bibi Netanyahu had to send in fighters to help the Druze. And President Ahmad Shara from Damascus sent in his jihadist Syrian army to try and quell the insurgency, presumably. But we know that his own troops are jihadist warriors that remove their uniforms and join the Bedouin terrorists to massacre the Druze. That brought about the Israeli intervention into this matter, because Israel had Druze community in the northern Golan Heights area that had families in Sueda. And these Druze community in Israel are faithful people to Israel. They are in the IDF. And their brethren are being slaughtered. And Israel had to show that they are concerned for its Druze community. And that made Ahmad Shara very angry, thinking that Israel was trying to dismember Syria as what happened in Yugoslavia and the Balkans. And he threatened to break that understanding that he had with Bibi Netanyahu. So the peace deal looks a bit shaky right now. Added to the fact that Bibi Netanyahu has bombed the Catholic Church in Gaza, burned down possibly a church in Samaria. President Trump is getting a bit annoyed with Bibi Netanyahu and looking more to working with Ahmad Jolani himself in Syria. So watch these developments carefully as events transcribe. So the question that some of you has asked, Ahmad Jolani, also known as Ahmad Hussein al-Shara, who is he? Is he the Antichrist? So let me take the third episode here just to look at this quickly. His real name is Ahmad al-Shara, right? His jihadist name is al-Jolani, but now he has dropped the al-Jolani Namdigua because that was associated with his jihadist past. Now he has put on a coat, put on a tie, and he wants to have more legitimacy as a moderate leader of Syria today. but he was born a Syrian, right, in Riyadh, because his father was serving as an oil engineer in Saudi Arabia at that time. 1989, the entire family moved back to Damascus, Syria. Now, in 2003, President George Bush Jr. invaded Iraq, Operation Freedom Iraq, and Ahmad Jolani joined the jihadis to fight against American forces. He was arrested, put into prison for 5 years, and when he was released, he joined Abu Bakr Baghdadi, the caliphate of ISIS in Iraq. In 2011, Baghdadi sent Ahmad Jolani back into Syria to form a new ISIS front known as al-Nusra, form that new caliphate known as ISIL, I-S-I-L, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, which includes Lebanon and Syria. But it was a very violent group, this ISIS group, too violent. And so al-Jolani broke away from Baghdadi to form his own group in Syria known as the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, aligned more towards al-Qaeda in its fight against Bashar Assad in the Syrian civil war that began in 2011. Now, mind you, friends, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the word al-Sham here, is Greater Syria, that includes Lebanon and Israel. So, the HTS terminal objective is to create the Greater Syria, inclusive of Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Northern Jordan. That's the primary objective of all these jihadis. Don't forget that. But you know what happened? December 2024, al-Jolani led this al-Qaeda jihadist HTS group to topple the government of Bashar Assad, take over the government of Syria. Suddenly, you see this white horse coming, bursting out into the scene, conquering and to conquer with minimal armaments. Just a bull. So that is Jolani that we are seeing here. Okay? So, and that began the massacre of the Alawite Shia splinter group in western Syria, and late July, the massacre of the Druze in southern Syria. Al-Jolani doesn't seem to have control over his jihadist Syrian army. Or is he in league with them? That is something to watch for. Although President Trump sees him as a blue-eyed baby to lead this Abrahamic God, since all the other kings are not quite ready to be the first, President Trump was hoping that al-Jolani would be the first to lead this entire 10 kings into this new Middle Peace Accord. But Israel does not quite trust him. And that's why the intrusion in Syria recently. Okay. Now, but scriptures give us some clues about who this guy will be. Scriptures call him the Assyrian, and Jolani is Assyrian. Okay, Micah chapter 5, verse 5, Isaiah 14. He is also known as the king of the north, Daniel 11, chapter 40. Jolani comes from the north. He is also known as Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38, verse 2. Now, again, some of you may not agree with me on this. I already shared this with you. He is also known as the man of lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. All these are titles given to this man in the end. And Daniel 11:21 tells us this, that in his place shall arise a vile person, to whom they will not give the honor of royalty, just a terrorist, but he shall come in without warning, peaceably, appearing as a moderate precedent and seize the kingdom by intrigue, by flattery. So we see shadows of Al-Jolani here. Perhaps Daniel 11 verse 22, next verse. The force of the army shall be swept away from before him. Just as he marched down, within 2 weeks, he swept away all of Assad's army. They'll be broken. And also the prince of the covenant. He will enter into Israel, which is the target of Tariq al-Sham, to create that new caliphate of greater Syria, inclusive of Lebanon, and the prince of the covenant, Israel. So wait and see, will this be fulfilled? Verse 23, agreement is made with him, a league is made with him. What President Trump is trying to do, could it be? Could it be? But he shall act deceitfully, and he shall come up, become strong with a small people. With a very few of supporters, he will become very strong. You see the world going towards him today, even the EU leaders, even President Trump, all meeting with Al-Jolani now. Although the Middle East nations are still a bit cautious, only MBS seems to support him. Okay, so watch out again, keep our eyes open here. Still a bit premature, too early now to know if Ahmad al-Shara is that figure. The question for us today is this. Let me ask you, if Jolani joins this new Middle East peace accord, he has assured President he would join before this Druze problem came up. Could that be like this guy is going to confirm, strengthen that covenant that's mentioned in Daniel chapter 9, 27, confirm the right of Israel to be a nation? Perhaps. We'll wait and see. Right now, he has agreed for Israel to keep the Golan Heights. He will no longer contest Golan Heights from Israel. 1967. Okay, so we are seeing things moving in that direction. No one is quite sure when you read Daniel chapter 7 to chapter 12, Gog and Magog war, Ezekiel 38. Yes, we know the general geography of the nations involved. Still a bit unsure what's going on. But look, whatever it is, Yeshua commands us to know, to watch for signposts that's coming, especially the days that's ahead of us. And we are asked to endure. Matthew chapter 24. Because once that begins, we know that the bridegroom is at the door. He is ready to meet us. Right now, we are given directions, signposts, every which way to look up. Muhammad al-Shara, al-Jolani, his name, he has done multiple things. His sudden rise to military power, suddenly become a political leader, esteemed by much of the world. Moderate stance that he has put on, seemingly ingenious politically to many. Very, very much like that described of this man of lawlessness in Daniel chapter 11. Go and read that from verses 21 to 30. But we know that there are going to be two more wars in Daniel chapter 11 here, verses 21 to 30, between the north and the south, involving possibly Israel. The two-state solution, we know that's going to happen. Joel chapter 3, verse 2, God says, I have this against you because you have divided my land. This is going to happen. Okay, wait and see. Will he be instrumental in that? So all these events we have yet to see. We have to see whether it is him or whoever God's showing to us who will confirm that covenant. We haven't seen the sacrifices yet being allowed in the Temple Mount. Even right now, officially, there is no religious access into the Temple Mount yet. The Temple Mount is still under the Jordanian Waqf. Will all this change? They will. So keep our eyes open. Developments are moving very fast. These are events that will be coming next. That's why Jesus asks us, keep our eyes open. Watch out. Okay? And the Bible is very, very specific. We know what's going to happen. There's going to be an actual peace covenant with many. 7 years. And it's going to be affirmed by the little horn, the man of sin, in Daniel 9:27. And then we know that the morning and evening sacrifices will resume. Now, friends, listen very carefully. It doesn't say that when the covenant is signed, the sacrifices will begin. Not necessary. It could be some period of time first before the sacrifices begin. The covenant, the treaty, accord will be signed first. And then maybe a few months later, this will be negotiated. Okay? Do not tie the two things together. Scriptures doesn't tell us that. And we know from Daniel chapter 7 that the abomination that causes desolation on the wings of the temple, that's going to be recognizable. Something is going to be up there that will cause desolation in Jerusalem. People are going to flee. There's going to be a temple, whether it's on the Temple Mount or it's going to be the city of David, we don't know. We've got to keep our eyes open. Something, a temple will have to be set up. An abomination is going to be set up on that temple. Sacrifices are going to be stopped. And then you know exactly we have 3.5 years left. That begins the period of the Great Tribulation Jesus mentioned. And we know also from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that this man of lawlessness, he is going to reveal himself for who he is. Now we see his true face. Right now, Jelani can be talking from both sides of his mouth, but we are still not sure. He presents himself as a respectable politician, very moderate in his views. On the other hand, he's supporting the jihadist warriors who come down to massacre the Druze community. Something that we need to watch carefully. But we know that his true face will be revealed and he will exalt himself above all that is called God or is worship, and he shall sit in that temple. The temple will be there. And he will proclaim himself to be God. And then he'll be marked by Satan's activity with all powerful signs, wonders. It's going to be a rough ride for all the covenant people, Christians and Jews together. These are clear GPS that God has given to us from Daniel, from Thessalonians. Until then, until all these things happen, until sacrifices are stopped and the abomination is there, until he reveals himself and declares himself to be worshipped, until then, we can't be sure. Whatever that's happening, whether he is the Antichrist or not, is all conjectural. We can only speculate. But I want you to look at this. This is now, right now, this is the first time in all its 77-year history that Israel is looking at the possibility of a peace with all of its border neighbors, all the borders, including Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan. Possible peace is now in the horizon. Never in its history has Israel obtained this opportunity. And once this covenant is signed, Ezekiel 38 tells us this, a land that's recovered from war, a land of unwalled villages settling in peace, whether it's literally unwalled or symbolically it has let down its guards. We don't know. We got to wait and see. Okay? And just imagine the joy in the world. If President Trump can bring about this Middle Eastern accord, peace, with the temple being allowed to be rebuilt, with a worldwide message of peace, with a Nobel Prize peace given to him, safety to this whole cauldron of the Middle East. President Trump, the art of the deal guy, is looking to making that peace with Russia and Ukraine, with Iran, with India, Pakistan, Taiwan, with Azerbaijan, Armenia just this week. Is peace available to the Middle East soon? And we need to be ready for that day. Many are asking us, why are you worried about all these things? Things will happen because God plans it, que sera, sera. But no, God says, all of us who have this Maranatha cry, come Lord Jesus, we need to pay attention to all these prophetic scriptures that's given to us in the Bible. We need to know what we can know, and we need to cling to what we can cling to, so that we make it through the end, so that we can endure to the end. Jesus tells us this, he who endures to the end will be saved. Now, every time when I talk about he who endures to the end, the question of once saved, always saved will always come up. This is not a platform to discuss these things. All I know is people have grown cold. Many of my friends, church leaders I know who have been on fire, I see them back away. I see them backslide. They have grown cold. And Jesus warns us in Matthew chapter 24, verse 10, verse 11, verse 12. The love of many will grow cold. Many will turn away. Apostasy will come in. They will betray one another. We don't want to be with them. Okay? We want to be able to stand firm for Christ. We want to pray that Christ will give us that strength to endure to the end, to stay faithful to the end, so that we'll be saved. He who endures to the end will be saved. Okay? Now, so the Jeremiah call to all of us believers to warn people who are asleep, people who don't care, especially to pray for the covenant people in Israel itself. And this will happen through the Messianic believers inside of Israel. Pray for them that they will be able to reach out to their fellow Jews there. Daniel 11, verse 32 to 33 says that in the end time, all these wise people, they will rise up. They will do mighty exploits for God. They will turn many of their brethren to the gospel. Pray for that peace to rule over their hearts between them and God, the peace of Jerusalem, the peace of God to rest on these people. Watch for Turkey. That's the next biggest threat. Turkey is the one that's supporting Giuliani. Giuliani grew up because of Turkey's support. The issue of Syria today, all right, can Bibi Netanyahu trust Giuliani enough to settle the dispute in Syria? That has got to be resolved. How much will Israel give up? How much Al-Sharaa has now said, we will not fight with Israel for the Golan Heights. What about Mount Hermon? What about the buffer zone that Israel has occupied recently? What will happen to Gaza? Will these nations agree together to bring about security arrangements to govern over Gaza and the Palestinian population that have either chosen to migrate or to stay back? So yes, friends, the prospects for peace between Israel and all her neighbors, that's very real. Events are moving towards that end. President Trump is working towards that end, even inviting President Giuliani, even inviting Azerbaijan today to join these Abrahamic Accords together. Israel is ready to celebrate. The problem, Gaza has got to be settled, and they're working towards that end feverishly. And then all the nations, the 10 kings, will they come together? And will Ahmad Shara be the one to affirm that covenant? Daniel 9:37. Watch and pray. The warning has always been there towards Israel. The circle of chastisement and blessing, that cycle has been repeated throughout history to warn Israel not to trust in its own chariots and horses, not to trust in the IDF completely, but to trust in the God of Israel, not to trust in making treaties of death, covenants of death with the nations around, whether it be Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, whatever it is. These treaties and these peace may not last. The warning is that peace can only be found when you return in right relationship to your God, the God of Israel. And 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3 has warned the people of God today, warn all of us who are looking towards that peace. It will be premature. When the world declares peace, when Israel declares peace, suddenly invasion will come from the north. And Israel has got to be on guard, to lean on to their God, the God of Israel, not to their iron dome. Okay. So these are the lessons that we get from our prophetic updates on the 12-day war between Israel and Iran and the follow-up possibility of the Middle East peace accord. So that's all the time that we have left for today. We'll meet you again in our next prophetic update. Until then, God bless all of you and hold on to the faith. In Jesus' name, amen.